Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be going over the worst thing about every single Call of Duty Zombies map, including the non-Treyarch maps. So I've done this before with the worst thing about every single Zombies game, but I haven't actually done this for each individual map. So this will be interesting. I'm just going to be picking the one main thing that brings the map down the most compared to any other things I can think of. Starting off with Nacht-der-Untoten, I'm just going to say the fact that zombies take forever to actually spawn in on this map, especially in the World at War version, just waiting around for the first few rounds, it's terrible, man. Like, it takes so long for the zombies to come in. And I know the reason they did this, they wanted to have that like scary, eerie feel where, you know, the zombies slowly creep in, and then obviously as the round goes on, they come in a lot faster. But when you played the map so many times over the past 15 years, you just want the zombies to spawn in a little bit faster, but they don't do that. And this wouldn't really be a problem if the map had like a lot of little Easter eggs and things to do, but the map is so bare bones that there's nothing to do in between rounds other than just rebuild barriers, which is not a fun thing to do. So the first like 10 rounds of Nacht is usually pretty boring, but once you get into later rounds, it's a little bit more exciting. Now for Verrückt, I couldn't think of anything that awful about this map, but the one thing I did think of was for the remade version of this in Black Ops 1, they decided to put in the Winter's Howl on the map for some reason, which is a really bad wonder weapon. So I always felt like that was just kind of annoying, like why put one of the worst wonder weapons on this map? You could have put any other wonder weapon and I probably would have liked it a lot more, but they put the Winter's Howl, which is pretty much useless. Next up we have Shinonuma, which just like Verrückt, I don't really think there's that many awful things about this map. But for me, Shinonuma's biggest issue is the layout, having a random perk in each location. I think that really works in some of the later versions of Shinonuma, especially the Vanguard version. But when it comes to the World at War version especially, because Quick Revive is useless on solo and Double Tap is just not very good in World at War, there's really only any need to get Juggernog and Speed Cola, so therefore 2 of the 4 perks that you get are kind of worthless. So these areas, let's say there's an area with Quick Revive, it makes that area pretty much worthless on solo. You never need to go in that area ever again, unless it's the one area that's really good for training. But if it's not that area, you're never going to touch that part of the map again. It's just not a great map design, in my opinion. It works really well, like I said, in later versions, but not in the World at War version. And for Der Riese, this is a pretty easy one to go with, the Wunderwaffe glitch that takes away Jug. This is one of the worst things ever on any zombies map because, like, Der Riese is such a great map on World at War, but this one thing just completely ruins the main wonder weapon. Like, you don't want to use the Wunderwaffe because of the Jug glitch. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on World at War, there is a glitch that can happen with the Wunderwaffe sometimes where it actually will remove your Jug, and it won't actually show that it's removed your Jug, but the actual effects of Jug will be removed, which is one of the reasons a lot of people don't play the World at War version of Der Riese anymore. They'll just play the Black Ops 1 version or the Giant. So it's kind of a shame because I really do like playing the World at War version, but this does kind of ruin it. With Kino der Toten, I'm just going to go with the fact that there was really no innovation on this map, especially for being the first map on Black Ops 1. I know it's a very iconic map to a lot of people, but when you really look at it, what did it do that Der Riese didn't do? It didn't add any new Easter egg type stuff. It didn't add any big new features. Literally the only like new thing is, I guess you can say, the Thunder Gun, but everything else is pretty much the same as Der Riese. So I always felt like it was such a sauceless map. With 5, I really hate the map layout. I've really just never enjoyed how it works and how you get to each area through the elevators. Of course, there's also the teleporters, but because the teleporters bring you to random locations, it's not like classified where it tells you where it's going. So you just have to go in there and then you get teleported to someone random on the map. It gets kind of annoying. For Ascension, this one is very easy. Gonna go with the monkeys taking your perks. I don't think the idea and concept is a bad concept, but especially for solo, it becomes so frustrating because you physically can't really keep all your perks, especially if your perks are scattered around the map. And once you get more than 4 perks, let's say you get 4 and then you get a free perk drop from the monkeys because you successfully, protect all your perks. Now you have 5. There's no way you're keeping all 5 of those. You're gonna lose them. And because they don't have a system where it like gives you a free perk slot after getting that 5th one, if you lose that 5th one, you can't get that 5th one back unless you get it from the monkeys. You can't just go buy it back. So it's a really frustrating map because of that. It's not as bad when you're with 4 players because one person can protect, each area of the map and you're probably going to be fine. But for solo especially, I think they should have balanced it a little bit better to make it so the monkeys only attack like one area at a time, or maybe make it so you will get a free perk as long as you protect a perk. Like, don't make it so even if they touch the perk machine, you just can't get a free perk. Call of the Dead's biggest issue is obviously the wonder weapons. The VR-11 and the Scavenger are just not very good. They're not like bad in the early rounds. Like I do enjoy using the Scavenger up to like round maybe 40 or something like that. It's a really fun wonder weapon, and the VR-11 is a cool concept, but neither of them are good beyond those rounds. So when it comes to high rounds, it's pretty much impossible to get to a certain round, which is really odd because most zombie maps you can get pretty high. But this one is one that I don't even think it's possible to get past round 100, at least without mods and such. But, you know, if you wanted to just sit there and shoot zombies all day, sure, you can do that, but there's no traps, there's no, you know, wonder weapons that can kill enough within those rounds. So I think that hurts the high round gameplay on this map, but it doesn't really affect the map on the early rounds too much. For Shangri-La, I decided to go with the traps that hurt the player. Some of the traps I think are actually really cool, and it's a cool feature that I would love to see come back, but they should have utilized the traps in specific areas without messing up the main flow of the map, especially if you wanted to train around the map. It makes it nearly impossible sometimes, so you have to really pick and choose what areas you're going to either train or camp in. But the traps could have been utilized, maybe like, you know, Juggernog, where Juggernog is, you know, have it so there's traps leading to it so it's hard to get to it, but don't have it so just to get to another part of the map, you have to go through traps. You know what I mean? The same for like Pack-a-Punch. They could have had a bunch of traps leading to Pack-a-Punch, like some Indiana Jones type stuff, but instead they're just fluttered across the whole map, so you're pretty much always going to be running into them, especially if you're trying to do like a cross-map train. It just doesn't work. Now, I'm a big hater of Moon. I know a lot of people love this map, but the worst thing is by far the excavators. I think the excavators are one of the worst things in any zombie map ever. It's just not a fun feature. Closing off a part of the map unless you like get to it in time and utilize the hacker device to shut it down. It's the type of stuff I just don't feel like doing while I'm playing zombies. Any map that has things like this that shuts down certain parts of the map, it's frustrating. It's not a fun feature. I think it could have been utilized in an interesting way throughout the Easter egg, which it is kind of utilized in the Easter egg, but that should have been the only place it's utilized. Like the excavators only go off as you start doing the Easter egg, but don't have them be a part of the actual main map experience because that is not fun. There's definitely a lot of awful things about transit. You can say the method to get Pack-a-Punch is pretty bad. You can say the jet gun, you can say the lava, you can say the fog. But for me, I'm gonna go with the denizens just because I feel like going from area to area wouldn't be nearly as annoying if the denizens didn't exist. I actually would really enjoy going through the fog and kind of like, you know, juking out the zombies, because I don't think the fog's an awful thing because it is kind of creepy. It makes for an eerie atmosphere, but the denizens just ruin that. Like the way they implemented them, they could have denizens there, just don't have them grab onto your face and scratch the living hell out of it, because that's just not a fun mechanic. Originally for Nuketown, I was gonna say the random perk drops, but the more I've thought about it, the more I actually think it's not that bad of a feature. It's kind of just like a gimmick, but it can make the experience very different game to game, which I think could be a good thing. So I'm just gonna say it's just a very bare bones map, and I don't tend to like bare bones maps that much. I mean, I obviously like the World at War maps are very bare bones, but now that we're later into the zombies, games, I feel like I don't really want those types of maps anymore. So although it's meant to be just a small survival map experience, it's not one I tend to replay that often because it doesn't really have much to offer. For Die Rise, I'm going to go with the map layout. It's a very bad map layout for sure. It's not like impossible to navigate after you've learned it for quite a bit, but the way it's laid out, it makes it so there's certain positions you have to be in where the only way to get to another part of the map is to use the elevators, which then you have to wait for the elevators, which is kind of frustrating. And then also, sometimes you'll go like in one room, you'll just switch one room, that's all you'll do. And to get to that other room that you were just in, you have to go around the entire map, do like a whole entire, circle around it, which obviously is not something you want to do just to get to one area of the map that you just switched from. You were 2 feet away from that area, and now to get back there, you have to go all the way around. That's a pretty terrible thing in my opinion. Everyone thinks Mob of the Dead is a flawless masterpiece, but there is one really bad thing about this map, and that is the fact that every time you want to go back to Pack-a-Punch, you have to grab fuel around the map. Why? Why do that? I don't see any reason why this needs to be a thing. Why not just when we get back to the, the Alcatraz Island, we can just go straight back to the plane and go right there? Why do I have to go all the way around the map picking up fuel canisters? It's not a fun mechanic. Maybe you can have like a cooldown on the plane so we can't just go back right away. Maybe make the cooldown like, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But why make it so I have to go all around the map? It's just not a fun mechanic at all. For Buried, I'm actually going to say that the fact that it doesn't include all of the great quality of life changes that Mob of the Dead made, especially when it comes to picking up parts. This is a very, very specific thing, and I know the reason this was is because these maps were made by different people. Mob of the Dead was, of course, Jason Blundell's map, but then Buried was Jimmy Zielinski's map. But why couldn't Jimmy Zielinski adopt the style that Mob of the Dead introduced in terms of picking up parts automatically, just, you know, going right to your inventory and you could have multiple parts at a time? But instead, Barry decided to go back to that die rise thing where you now had to pick up one part at a time, and that's just not fun at all because you have to go back and forth between the buildables. Like, no, I don't like that. I think it's much better on Mob of the Dead where the parts are just scattered around, you have to go find them, and then you can just pick all of them up and then go build it whenever you want. There's a lot of quality of life changes Mob of the Dead had that Buried should have adopted. For Origins, I'm going to say the Templar zombies shutting off the power, which also, of course, shuts down the Pack-a-Punch. I always thought this wasn't like a terrible thing. I absolutely love Origins, so there's really not many terrible things about the map. But out of anything I could possibly think of, this is the one feature that I really wouldn't mind if they just didn't have this. Like, it probably would make the map a tiny bit better, but not by a lot, because like I said, not many bad things about Origins. And on to Exo Zombies, I'm gonna just go right through each of the maps really fast because I actually think my biggest issue with each of these maps is gonna be the exact same thing. And it's just simply the Exo Zombie mechanics. And a lot of that has to do with the Pack-a-Punch system, the EMZs, most of the bosses really, and just the way it feels and the way it plays. It's pretty bad. There's genuinely some decent things on some of these maps. I really enjoy some of the wonder weapons and the power-ups are really cool. Some of the Easter eggs have some fun steps here and there. They're not great, but they're some fun steps. But the just general mechanics of this game are just so poor that I feel like it immediately makes these maps a lot less enjoyable than they maybe could have been otherwise. So yeah, I'm just going to do it in one go there because it's going to be the same thing for each map. Now for Shadows of Evil, this is going to be a very specific problem with the map that I don't think anyone in the entire world has probably ever mentioned except for me. But this is the fact that there is no way to earn more than 4 perks without Gobblegums. Now, if you have seen any Black Ops 2 map, majority of them at least, you can earn more than 4 perks because they have little side quests that let you do it. Origins, for example, has the dig sites. Buried has the witches giving out free perks. Die Rise has all the different Nova crawlers. If you like do those rounds and you successfully don't miss a single shot for the entire round, or you just melee the entire round, you get a free perk. That's really cool. You know, I like to see stuff like that. And Shadows of Evil, there's a lot of cool ways they could have implemented free perks, but they just don't do it. There's not a single way to get a free perk on that map. The only way to do it is with Mega Gobblegums, which I thought was a big issue. And switching over right to Der Eisendrache, my biggest issue with that map is also that same thing, the fact that there's no way to earn more than 4 perks without Gobblegums. And like I said, this map as well has a lot of different ways they could have implemented it. For Shadows of Evil, they could have done the pods. The pods could have rewarded a free perk. And then also with Der Eisendrache, the gondola could have rewarded free perks, but they don't do it. They just didn't include it. So the only way to get more than 4 is with Sir and Mega Gobblegums, and I don't think that's a good thing. For Zetsubo no Shima, I'm going to go with the bullet step of the Easter egg. And now that we're in Black Ops 3, we're going to start to get a lot more maps where my biggest issue is going to be something related to the Easter egg. And that's because I feel like the Easter eggs became a much bigger focus Black Ops 3 onward, whereas beforehand, it really wasn't like the main focus for most people. You know, some people love the Black Ops 2 Easter eggs, but I always felt like those were kind of like a secondary thing. I mainly played the maps just for the map itself. If it had an Easter egg, cool. If it didn't, whatever. But once we got to Black Ops 3 onward, I mean, it was all about the Easter eggs. So they're really important to me, which means if they're not great, it is going to be a bigger problem to the map. And for Zetsubo no Shima, the bullet step is pretty terrible. If you guys don't know what the bullet step is, you have to keep watering a plant with the blue water in order to get a bullet. And you just need to simply get it to use it in the gun to shoot down the plane. Pretty simple, right? But there's really bad RNG with actually getting the bullet from the plant. There's been some times where it's taken me like 3 or 4 goes, which could take upwards of like 10 rounds just to get the bullet. That should not be the case. It should immediately give you the bullet right away. And then even when you're actually doing the bullet step itself, sometimes the thing is really finicky. So if you miss when you shoot the plane, if you actually miss, you have to do the whole thing again to get the bullet again. It's just a really bad step, and it makes an otherwise decent Easter egg not nearly as good as it would have been otherwise. And with Garad Krovi, I also have an Easter egg step. I love Garad Krovi Easter egg. It's one of my favorite of all time, but the valve step is pretty bad. And it's not because it's like a poorly designed step. It's just one of those things that's nearly impossible for most people to figure out on their own. So everyone just uses this online document to like input the numbers that you get for the valve step, and then just gives you the answer. And I just don't think it's a great way to have a step. Obviously, they should have made it as something different. I like puzzles. I think puzzles are fine, but make it a more interesting puzzle that at least people want to do in game, rather than just using some external source to solve it for them. Revelations was always an odd map to me because I feel like it doesn't really add anything new other than obviously, you know, having like new storyline stuff. But for the most part, the map is made up of old maps, old wonder weapons. Like there's really not many new things on this map. Even most of the bosses are things we've seen before. So it didn't really feel like that new of a map. But if they're gonna bring back all of this stuff, they should have gone further with it then. They should have made it more nostalgia heavy, had more like wonder weapons returning, more bosses, more maps. They should have just went so much further with it. Either do that or just add some new stuff. You know what I mean? Like they needed either more new stuff or more old stuff is basically the way I'm putting it. Now, Zombies in Spaceland is a near perfect map, so it's going to be very hard to find any big issues with this map. The one thing I can think of is I do wish there was just a few more rides to the map, because the only actual like rides that you can actually, you know, use are of course the roller coaster, and then there's I guess the slides, but like they're just a tiny thing, something too crazy. Most of the rides you use as traps, but how cool would it be if there was like actually more things that you can ride? Like imagine like a Ferris wheel that you can actually ride. Stuff like that would have been really cool. It would have made an already masterpiece of a map even better. For Raven the Redwoods, this map is pretty inoffensive all around. It really doesn't do anything that bad. So the one thing I dislike about this map is that goddamn boat ride to Pack-a-Punch takes way too long. It's ridiculously slow, and it genuinely pisses me off every time I play the map. Shaolin Shuffle, I think, is a really underrated map, but the one thing that I do agree with most people on is the fact that the ninjas are not fun to go up against in higher rounds. Now, in the early rounds, when they first start spawning in like the 20s, they're really not that bad. If you have decent weapons, especially if you have the katana or the upgraded pistols, you're gonna be just fine. But once you get to like, you know, 40s and beyond, yes, they start to get really annoying and frustrating to go up against, because they're the type of bosses that make it really hard to actually train. It kind of forces you to sit in a corner. I wouldn't mind them if they only came in like every now and then, but because they kind of just come in every single round once you get to those later rounds, I think they start to create a big problem with the map. For Attack of the Radioactive Thing, I'm gonna say most of the Easter egg I just don't think is very replayable. I actually really enjoyed first doing this Easter egg. The first time I did it, it was actually really fun trying to solve it all. Obviously, I used a guide for a lot of it, but some of it I didn't use a guide for, and I was actually trying to figure it out myself, and it was a really good time. But doing it again is not fun. It's like, you know, you do a really hard project, you're not going to want to do that exact same project again. I think Easter eggs should be complex. I think they should be difficult, but they have to be in a way where they are still replayable. And I just don't think this one was that at all. It's an Easter egg I've never replayed. I've actually only done this ever once, and I don't really plan on doing it again, but I probably will someday, because it was a fun Easter egg regardless. Beast from Beyond has definitely a lot of issues, but I think the worst thing about it is the fact that it has not nearly as much content on the map compared to the prior Infinite Warfare maps. For some reason, each Infinite Warfare map got like less and less content as they went along. I don't know why. Like there were so many little buildables and so many little traps, so many little features on maps like Spaceland and Raven the Redwoods. But once you get to Beast from Beyond, there's barely anything on this map available to the player. It's a very bare bones map, surprisingly. The Easter egg's actually very short, so I always felt like this map just felt plain, and that's honestly one of the worst things a map could be, in my opinion. For the Final Reich and Groston House, I'm going to put both these maps together because my main issue with both these maps are the exact same, and that's just the whistling zombie. Now, I don't mind these bosses in theory, but I think the fact that they spawn in so frequently gets really annoying because they're not really enjoyable bosses to take down when they're in big groups. Now, they did change this over time. It used to be a lot worse when the map first came out, but I still think it's kind of annoying even the way it is currently. But it doesn't ruin these maps because I actually really enjoy these maps. I think the Final Reich is fantastic, and I think Groston House is one of the best survival maps of all time. For the Darkest Shore, I genuinely think this is one of the worst balanced Easter egg of all time. It's got some really fun steps, but there's some steps that are so annoying on solo. I'm sure they're not nearly as bad co-op, but oh my god, some of those steps on solo, they're really difficult. It's probably one of the hardest Easter eggs of all time, but it's like difficult in a way where it's just unbearably frustrating, and I don't think it's in a good way. So gotta say that's the worst thing about the Darkest Shore. For the Shadowed Throne, I'm gonna say the worst thing about this map is the fact that you have to get the Wonder Weapon in order to open up the Pack-a-Punch. I think that's a really weird thing. Like, I can't think of any other map where it requires you to get the Wonder Weapon of the map just to open up Pack-a-Punch. That shouldn't be a thing, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I should be able to play a map without having to get the Wonder Weapon and still being able to play the map and enjoy it. It doesn't really make sense to force me to use it, but it's just the way the map is. So I guess, you know, every time I play the map, I have to get the Wonder Weapon. Now, although the Tortured Path is not really a map and it's more of a general experience, kind of a mode, it does have 3 different maps, so we're just going to kind of include it all in one because my issue with these maps is pretty much the same. I think it's a cool concept in theory, but I don't think it's a good thing to replace an actual new map. Because this was a DLC 3 and this was replacing a possible new map we could have gotten, I thought that was a big problem, and it also really stunk that to be able to play these maps in the separate survival version of it, you had to complete the Easter egg, which is really weird to me because the people who want to play these maps in the survival mode probably don't want to do the Easter egg. Like, that's the thing. People wanted to play these in separate modes just because they just didn't care to play this objective version of zombies. And they eventually gave it to everyone like a month or 2 later, but it was just kind of annoying with those, you know, first 2 months where you had to do the Easter egg in order to unlock that other mode for it. Just kind of a weird mechanic. Now for the Frozen Dawn, I actually really think this map is underrated, and some of the puzzles throughout the Easter egg are really cool, like some of my favorite things ever in zombies Easter eggs. But the issue with these puzzles is that you can't really do them that easily without zombies hitting you. Of course, you can have, you know, another player hold a zombie, but that's not fun for anyone. And then you, of course, have the ability to make crawlers, but crawlers are kind of hard to make in really any zombies past Black Ops 3. And even then, they usually bleed out after a certain point. So it is really difficult to do these puzzles without zombies hitting you. I think these puzzles would be infinitely more fun if I could do them without zombies hitting me. Now, on to Voyage of Despair, I'm going to go with the Planet Step. A lot of people say the triangle, like, clock step is the worst part of this Easter egg, but I really never had an issue with that step. It's not that hard whatsoever. It's kind of simple, actually. But the Planet Step is just kind of not my thing. Now, I don't think it's like a hard step necessarily. It's just really annoying because it's actually kind of hard to see the planets. The colors of them are kind of like, they're really specific colors, and some of them are not that far off from another planet. So it's really easy to get one mixed up with another planet, and it happens frequently, and then you have to shoot it and then grab it in the right time. And if you do any part of the step wrong, you have to restart it from the beginning. It's a really frustrating thing, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I just think it's the worst thing about this map. For 9, I'm going to go with the Odin step, which is the last step, or one of the last steps of the Easter egg, where you had to shoot those symbols with the Death of Orion. Now, this step is so annoying because you have to, like, line up your shot so perfectly with these symbols to actually hit symbols like through the wall and then hit like another symbol. It's a really annoying step because, like, oh my god, I'll sit there for like 10 minutes just spamming this weapon at different angles and just not hitting it. I know there's like specific angles you're supposed to do, but like, it's so hard to actually get that angle. It's just, to me, it's just a weird step. For Blood of Dead, I'm going to say something similar that I said for the Frozen Dawn. There are some genuinely interesting puzzles on this map, some interesting steps, but the fact that you can't do them without zombies hitting you kind of ruins them. I really love Morse code. I do. I think it's an interesting concept, and having it in zombies is fine. But why can't you let me do this step without zombies hitting me? It makes it nearly impossible to do. You have to be using like Winter's Wail or, you know, holding zombies, throwing monkeys, but it's never enough time to actually input the code or Morse code, which makes it really frustrating. It would be fun otherwise, but it's just not the way it was made. For Classified, the main cutscene, the main Easter egg, I guess, being locked behind getting to round 150 is a really weird idea. I get they wanted to kind of do something for the high rounders, but that's the worst possible way to do something for the high rounders. You could have had anything else. You could have had some special reward, you know, blueprint weapon or something, some special camo you get for reaching that round. Why lock the story cutscene behind that? It makes no sense. They had the Project Scatty Easter egg right there. Just make that the main Easter egg. That's all you had to do. It's just a really weird thing that they decided to do here, because most people do not feel like playing 10 plus hours straight just to get to round 150. Dead of the Night is definitely an underrated map in my opinion, but I absolutely hate the scratch mark step for the Easter egg. I love most of the Easter egg, but trying to look at those little scratch marks around the map is so tedious because, well, first of all, there's so many locations for it, and then actually trying to see the scratch marks themselves, sometimes they're kind of hard to see. So this step would have been a lot better if there was just maybe less locations for the scratch marks, or if they just did something else for that step completely. I have no idea, but it's definitely the worst step of the Easter egg. The Easter egg itself, though, was pretty good. Now, I love the wonder weapons on Ancient Evil, but my one issue with these wonder weapons was just the ammo. There was just not enough ammo in them. I feel like you ran out of ammo so constantly, but if there was more ammo in them, or maybe you can pick up ammo from zombies, then I think these wonder weapons would be a lot more enjoyable to use because they're really cool. The gauntlets are awesome, but of course, not having that much ammo kind of makes them not that great in the higher rounds. For Alpha Omega, it's the same issue I have with Origins, and that is of course the fact that the power can be turned off, which also means the Pack-a-Punch can be turned off with the Nova Crawler zombies, I guess you can call them. I don't know, the ones that are like infected with the Nova gas, the ones that shut off the power. Now, this doesn't start to happen until like later in the rounds, and if you're doing the Easter egg, it's really not a problem because you probably finished the Easter egg before this even happens, but if you're trying to do any high round thing or you're just playing past a certain round, it does get kind of annoying, and it tends to be the worst thing about this map. For Togger Toten, I'm gonna go with the Easter egg being a big fetch quest, and I don't know why a lot of people genuinely love this Easter egg, like compared to some of the other maps in this game. I think it's actually one of the worst Easter eggs in Black Ops 4. It's great, the story's great, that's the best part about it, but when it comes to just the steps, they're not fun. Most of them are just go around this map, you know, pick up items, throw snowballs at orbs. It's a very much a fetch questy type of a map, and I just don't think it works for me. I've never really enjoyed doing it, but I don't know, a lot of people like it for some reason. Next up, we have D Machine, and my biggest issue with this map is just the fact that it took a massive step back for zombies when it comes to the amount of content expected on a map, especially as a launch map. It was the only launch map, and it had barely anything on it. It was one of the least content heavy maps we've ever had in zombies since like Black Ops 1, maybe. Like, it was so bare bones. There's a really tiny Easter egg that has barely any steps to it. It's very easy, very simplistic. There's barely any side quests on this map, barely any features to mess around with. It's such a simplistic map, which some people like that, but I found that to be such a boring aspect about this map. It got so boring so fast. I feel like I mastered this map within literally a week, not even, maybe like a couple days, and I felt like I did everything I had possibly could do on this map. Next up, we have Firebase Z, and I'm gonna go with the Mimic step. I know a lot of people hate that step as much as I do, and I agree 100%. It is a very finicky step that has a very specific thing you gotta do, and it's not like it's hard necessarily, it's just not fun, and sometimes it doesn't really go right, and then it's just like, it's not really your fault when it doesn't go right either. That's the biggest issue with it, because of how finicky it could be. For Outbreak, the biggest issue is definitely just the fact that it's a lot of traveling around the big maps that you have to play on, and I feel like that's like 80% of my experience on Outbreak. It's just, oh, I'm just driving around, getting from point A to point B, or running around from point A to point B. There's so much filler space in these regions. The best regions are definitely the smaller ones, like Collateral and Armada. Like, those are definitely the best ones because they're just a lot smaller, and there's less travel time to get from one area to another. But spending most of your match just running from one place to another, it's not fun. I much prefer the maps being way more detailed and full of content like they are within round-based, whereas in the Outbreak, that's just not the case. For Mallard or Toten, I'm gonna go with the fact that the map was just taken from campaign, and a lot of people don't see this as an issue. A lot of people are like, whatever, it doesn't matter. I could definitely see your point, but because there's only 4 maps in Cold War, the fact that another map was just kind of like, felt like another location I've already seen in the game definitely kind of hurt it quite a bit, especially after having only Outbreak for a couple months, which is only made up of multiplayer locations. So to go to this was just like, I've already seen this in campaign. I already knew what the map was going to kind of look like for the most part. And it did take away the feel from it a little bit. I do think the lack of originality from some of these Cold War maps is what hurts them. And for Forsaken, I'm going to say the same thing, the fact that it was taken from campaign, but to add on to that, the map layout itself is so bad, and they didn't even try to like translate it properly from campaign to zombies. They kind of just threw it in exactly as it is, which made it so It's probably one of the worst map layouts of all time. Just going from place to place, you have to go through a teleporter to get to most areas. It's like 5 different teleporters on this map, which is just too much. They could have found a more unique and interesting way to combine the areas, but they really didn't. They just use zip lines and teleporters, which is really boring in my opinion. I think it's a cool location, but like I said, I've already seen it in the campaign, so it immediately felt a lot less interesting than it would have been otherwise. Now with Duranfang and Terra Maldicta from Vanguard, I'm going to say the exact same thing for both of them because they're both the same, sort of mode. It's just an awfully bad, repetitive gameplay flow for these maps. It's terrible. I just do not enjoy these maps whatsoever because it's the same thing every time you play. There's just, you go from one area to the next doing these really boring objectives that you're forced to do, and the only other choice you have is to maybe go into the void to play it like it's kind of like round-based, but not really, when I would rather just play the actual round-based maps in this game as opposed to just playing this. It's terrible mode. I'm not a fan of it. I know a lot of people aren't as well, and you can obviously see why. For Shinonuma, I'm gonna say the fact that it lacks a lot of side quests, like there's a decent Easter egg on Shinonuma Reborn, but there's really not many side Easter eggs, like compared to some other maps from like Black Ops 4 and before. Even Cold War lacked a lot of side quests, obviously, so maybe I wasn't expecting that many, but it does hurt the map in terms of replayability a bit, because when I play the map, I feel like all I could do is the Easter egg and maybe just camo grind or something. There's really not many other options I have. For the Archon, I actually think this map is a bit underrated, but yes, it is a big issue that the map is literally just reusing the exact same location that was used for Terra Maldicta, a map that's already in the game. I feel like they definitely could have used a different location, or maybe just marketed it a bit differently, like market it as, okay, we're taking Terra Maldicta and turning into a round-based map and adding an Easter egg. That would have made people more excited because they would know what they're getting. They wouldn't be expecting some brand new location. They would just be knowing, okay, it's just going to be taking that map, turning it into round-based, and adding an Easter egg, which is fine in theory, but that's just not what they did. They marketed it as this new crazy map and everyone got so excited, so when they actually see the map, they're like, what the hell is this? And lastly, we have Operation Deadbolt from Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. Now, there's definitely a lot of things I can say for this. Like, one thing that's coming across my mind right now is the schematic cooldowns. I think the schematic cooldowns are really frustrating, but I'm actually going to say the same thing I said for Outbreak, where I feel like most of the time I play this mode, I'm just traveling around the map. I'm just driving around, getting from point A to point B, and that does take away from the experience, especially because there's a time limit here. When there's a time limit, that makes that way worse because now I'm spending like maybe half of my match just traveling from point A to point B because most of the map is filler. Most of the map has stuff I don't really need to mess with, so I'm just trying to get from one place to another. I know there's teleporters and rifts and stuff, but those aren't everywhere, so you're not always gonna have those available. Same with vehicles, they're not always available. They run out of fuel. It's just not fun traveling around this map. That's definitely one of the biggest issues. So that's gonna do it for my list of the worst thing about every single individual Call of Duty Zombies map of all time. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree? I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.